where to sit, but sit here.
Pick a chair. Yeah, I think because that green light's on right there. So.
Okay. Just you move it over. You move it here. That's okay. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today for this important hearing on the human rights crisis in Syria. I want to thank Congressman Keith Ellison, a Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission Executive Committee member, for encouraging the Commission to hold this hearing to highlight the horrific human rights situation in Syria and consider options for addressing it. I'd like to thank RuPaul Mehta, Kate Hickson, and the staff of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for organizing this hearing. I also want to thank our witnesses for testifying and for their leadership over the past year in raising awareness about the human rights crisis in Syria. Most especially, I believe we all need to thank the many people on the ground in Syria and in refugee camps in neighboring countries who have worked, sometimes at great risk to their own lives, to help the people in tremendous need and to share information about conditions inside Syria with the outside world. The arrest of a group of students in Dara for scrawling anti-regime graffiti on a wall in March 2011, just 1 year ago, sparked a wave of anger in that impoverished southern province. The government responded swiftly with force, setting off a cycle of protest and reprisal that spread across the country. Since last March, tens of thousands of Syrians have been arrested, detained arbitrarily, held incommunicado, and tortured as the Assad regime tries to crush its opponents and any voices of dissent or calls for reform. Severe beatings, electric shocks, and sexual violence have been used against Syrians by security personnel. In some cases, torture has been so severe the victims have died in custody. Medical professionals face arrest, prosecution, and even death if they try to provide medical assistance or carry out their obligation to put a patient's welfare first. As a result of the violence perpetrated by the Syrian government, more than 200,000 people have been displaced, and the number is rising rapidly. Refugees leave their homes daily, often under fire, to set out for neighboring Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. The Syrian government is deploying landmines near its borders as a deadly tactic to prevent civilians from escaping. Given the great insecurity inside Syria, I was pleased that the administration announced on Friday that it is designating temporary protected status for Syrian nationals in the United States. Despite widening international condemnation, Assad's regime has largely remained intact, and brutal repression by the Syrian government continues. Western and Arab countries have struggled to stop the bloodshed by calling on Assad to step down and imposing sanctions. 1 year into the Syrian revolt, the fight to oust Assad is cascading towards civil war, with more than 8,000 killed and no end in sight to the bloodshed. I've been very disappointed by the response of Russia and China to the crisis in Syria. While most of the international community has been united in seeking to apply heavy pressure on the Assad regime to stop its assault on the Syrian people, the governments of Russia and China have refused to support strong UN action to squeeze the regime. Even worse, Russia has continued to provide military aid to the Syrian government. The United States should not continue to purchase arms from Russian companies that are providing the government of Syria with lethal weapons. The Defense Department recently signed a $375 million contract to purchase helicopters for the Afghan military from the Russian state arms dealer. I believe this sends the wrong signal about the importance of withholding arms from a government that is committing terrible atrocities. The humanitarian situation in Syria remains catastrophic for civilians. We must all do we must do all we can to provide humanitarian assistance to Syrians in need and place more pressure on the Syrian government to stop its assault on the Syrian people. It is my hope that today's hearing will bring new awareness of human rights abuses currently taking place in Syria and new ideas for taking action to address these abuses and save lives in Syria. And before I turn this over to Congressman Ellison, who will chair this meeting, I want to thank Ambassador Ford for being here, and I want to thank you for your courage and for your activism on the ground while you were there. I think I speak for everybody here when I say that you made us very proud. So thank you very much, and I now turn this over to Congressman Ellison.
And now at this time, I'll recognize Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California, long-term advocate for human rights all over the world.
Thank you so very much. I'm very pleased to be here with you, Mr. Ellison and Mr. McGovern, and I'm remembering Tom Lantos and his leadership and what he did for this nation in organizing this Human Rights Commission. So I thank you, and also Congressman Wolf, who's supportive of this hearing today, Human Rights Crisis in Syria, and allowing me to participate. On March 18th, I had the honor of joining the Syrian American Council in Anaheim, California, for a commemoration of the first anniversary of the Syrian Revolution. And I was blessed by getting to know Ambassador Robert Ford and to have him give such a wonderful update on what was happening in Syria. And also, I had an opportunity to congratulate him on the courage that he has shown representing us all in Syria. He's here today, and I'm anxious to hear from him. The stories I heard from Syrians and Syrian Americans were truly heartbreaking. I want to begin by telling everyone how sorry I am for the devastating losses that have been experienced by Syrian families over the past year. Mere words cannot express the profound sorrow we all feel over the tremendous loss of life we have witnessed in Syria. It is difficult to imagine the sheer magnitude of the violence. It is estimated that over 8,000 people, maybe as many as 10,000, have been killed so far, and many of them are women and children. Panos Montezis, the recently appointed Syria coordinator for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, said that at least 230,000 people have fled their homes over the past year. That includes an estimated 30,000 people who have sought refuge in neighboring countries, and an additional 200,000 people who have been internally displaced. However, these numbers are only estimates because the brutal regime of Bashar al-Assad does not allow access for independent journalists, so the true extent of the violence may never be known. What is known is the repressive nature of Bashar al-Assad's regime. Peaceful protesters have been murdered, innocent civilians have been massacred, homes have been looted and destroyed, even funerals have come under fire. Arbitrary detention is common, and the regime uses ghastly forms of torture on individuals detained in its prisons. These appalling crimes are simply unacceptable. They are crimes against humanity, and there is no excuse for them. The International Committee of the Red Cross, along with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, have been trying to provide humanitarian assistance inside Syria. Their teams have distributed food, blankets, hygiene kits, and other supplies to people affected by the violence. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported that 5 convoys of trucks carrying humanitarian supplies entered Homs between February 11th and March 5th. However, access for humanitarian relief efforts has been limited and sporadic, even for the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. I know the situation is bleak, but we cannot give up hope. The United States must continue our efforts to unite the international community, facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance, and demand an end to the Assad regime. I look forward to the testimony today, and I hope that today's hearing will shed more light on the situation on the ground and also result in concrete policy recommendations for members of Congress who want to bring an end to the devastating violence and gross violations of human rights that are currently taking place every day in Syria. Mr. Ellison and Mr. Govern, when I was at this meeting in Anaheim, I made a commitment. My commitment was to come back and to get the Congressional Black Caucus more involved, to have us make statements and do press conferences, and to use our leadership to get the entire progressive community of Congress involved in dealing with what is going on in Syria. You were the first person I talked to, Mr. Allison, and you reminded me of a resolution that you were working on. I have joined on to that resolution, and I'm hopeful that you and I and others can use that resolution to do the kind of organizing that I committed to, that we would do. So I'm very thankful and appreciative that you have moved on this already with the resolution, and I look forward to working with you and Mr. McGovern even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And but also let me start by thanking you, Congressman McGovern, for your great leadership. This Human Rights Commission has done great things under your leadership and under the leadership of Frank Wolf, and I thank you both for agreeing to hold this hearing. It's my opinion that the United States House of Representatives should and can do more, even though the fact is that we have a broad agenda. Nothing could be more important than human rights of human beings, and we've got to step up and be the champion that the world expects us to be on human rights. I'd like to also thank President Obama and Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano for extending temporary protected status to Syrian nationals on Friday. It would have been cruel to send these individuals back to a war zone, especially given the fact that many of them are in the United States because they have raised questions about the al-Assad regime and might well be sent back to a situation that's dangerous and harmful to their lives or that of their family. We were right to send aid to these folks at their time of need, and I commend the administration for its compassionate leadership on the issue. I also want to express my gratitude to our incredible witnesses. Ambassador Ford, your presence here today means a lot. Your presence in Syria meant a lot. And your willingness to put yourself in harm's way to demonstrate American support for the Syrian people makes you a model ambassador. I'm one of those who don't believe that we hold our diplomats in high enough esteem. We correctly hold our men and women of the military in high esteem, but the fact is, winning friends and doing diplomacy and development around the world can be very dangerous work, as some of the experiences you had prove. But at the same time, I don't think the American people really know the great work you do, and I just personally want to commend you and thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our human rights experts on the second panel, Maria McFarland, Susan Nosel, Andrew Tabler, and Radwan Zadeh. Your attention to gross human rights violations and ongoing humanitarian crisis in Syria has been indispensable to our understanding. My sincere thanks to all of you. Even before the democratic uprising in Syria began, we saw the capacity of Bashar al-Assad's government to commit grave human rights abuses. The students in Daraa dared to echo the slogan that toppled the governments of Tunisia and Egypt, quote, "The people want to bring down the regime," unquote. Those students were only 10 to 15 years old. They were children, but they didn't stop the police from arresting them and even pulling out their fingernails. I remember earlier this year when I took to the House floor in last June to talk about Hamza al-Khatib. And may we never forget Hamza al-Khatib, 13-year-old boy who was arrested during the protests in Daraa, and he was held for a month before his tortured body was returned to his parents. As a father of four, that struck me in a very personal way, and I can't imagine what his parents are going through. He was held for a month, as I said, before his tortured body was returned to his parents, and he was mutilated in ways that I can't mention here. Again, the regime's message was clear. If you dare to speak out, we will kill you. And this is really horrible torture that young Hamza had to endure, but the message really was to the Syrian people as to what will happen if you speak out. The machinery of Syrian regime has now killed more than 8,000 people, perhaps, as my colleague Congresswoman Waters said, maybe as many as 10,000. We don't know, because press freedom is denied. In fact, another great profession, journalism, and with another great leader in it, Anthony Shadid, lost his life trying to get the story out, risking great things. Many journalists have done so. Anthony Shadid gave his life to get the story out. But they show no sign of letting up in the al-Assad regime. Indeed, the momentum is difficult to judge, but it is disturbing that Russian ships and Iranian planes continue to restock the regime's arms and supplies. Despite the media blackout, the world is aware of the grave human rights violations in Syria because people's tenacity to get the stories out. Many great credit needs to go to those people who have used social media and other means and become citizen journalists to try to tell the world what's going on in Syria. And we thank them. And I also thank many Syrian Americans who really are in many cases, only source of good information that we other Americans have. So I want to encourage Syrian Americans to continue to get the story and to tell it, because without you, we simply don't really know what's going on. And I know telling the story is painful to you because, of course, this is your homeland, and in some cases your family who are under threat. But I commend you for enduring the pain it takes to tell the story so that we may know. Because if we don't know, we can't act. I'll continue to whip support for the resolution HRES 549 so that Syria remains a priority in Congress. I want to thank colleagues who have joined the resolution, including Congressman Waters, and we're talking with many members, including Congressman McGovern and others, to try to get this resolution moved forward. Let me just wrap up right here and just say that this panel is a product of the request of serious, committed advocates for human rights. It ought to be the case that human beings in this world can raise their voices and say what they believe is true without running the risk of their own lives. Political conflict should be resolved at the ballot box, not in a torture chamber. And we should all remember the great price being paid by advocates for human rights right now. So without any further delay, let me introduce Ambassador Robert S. Ford. Ambassador Ford is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, holding the rank of Minister Counselor. Most recently, he served the State Department's Office of Inspector General of the OIG. He has previously served the U.S. Ambassador to Algeria, political counselor, and Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and the Deputy Chief of Mission in Bahrain. His early overseas postings include Izmir, Cairo, and Yaoundé. And in Washington, he has served as the Egypt and North Africa Economic Affairs Officer. Ambassador Ford grew up in Denver, Colorado, earned his bachelor's degree at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, and his master's degree from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington. His most recent appointment has been to Syria, where he very courageously went to areas that the government did not want him to go, apparently, and yet he stood in those places at great risk to himself, and is certainly a credit to everyone who wears the label diplomat and is a model in that regard. So with no further ado, Ambassador Ford, please share with us your testimony.